we don't find anything too crazy. You might find an old septic tank that they didn't know was there, and you have to
Ooh.
abandon it, or dig it up and haul it
I
off.
saw Joe
But
Dirt. It's
I
exciting.
wouldn't say anything crazy.
Joe Dirt.
Yeah.
I bet a Joe Dirt reference wasn't on your bingo card for this.
Good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing too crazy.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Sim Mentors podcast. My name is Matt Graves, and I co-host each week's Kyle Grandell. I screw that up every week, Kyle. How are you?
Well, you do screwed up, and I look forward to it, honestly, Matt. So thanks for doing it again. I'm doing well. I'm doing great, man.
It's a weekly thing. I think people, they at least listen to the first 15, 30 seconds to see what part of the intro I'm going to screw up each week. So it's usually the same part.
Well, the fun part is it's kind of like the meme thing that I do. It's like every week you get to screw up the intro, and then I get to do the meme thing. So I guess, the guests actually should start doing part of it, too. They can do something funny towards the end, maybe. We'll add that in.
We'll have to make them do something at the very, very end so people listen for the full hour.
Something edgy, something to get them in trouble. That's what I'm thinking.
That's what I think too. Cool. We have an hour. I'll figure something out and put Jack on the spot. Hey, what's up, Jack? How are you?
Oh, hey,
Good, man.
Jack's here.
Hey guys, yeah, no,
Hey, good to meet you.
just having fun listening to the banter.
This week's guest is Jack Rowe. Let's go. Welcome, Jack. You want to give us a little bit of background of yourself for people who don't know you?
Yeah, I'm here as representing kind of the land development profession. I'm a huge evangelist, or try to be. So I've been in this industry. First got exposed about a decade ago. Tried my hand at a few things, and then found out that I really liked it. So I went to kind of grad school. I think Matt, you're an Aggie too.
I
So I
am.
went to Texas A&M. They have kind of a rare, probably a one of a kind program that really touches on community, like residential land development, a lot. And it was a great pipeline into the industry. And
Was that through the architecture school or through like civil engineering or?
it's in the College of Art, well, now School of Architecture. Yeah.
I got you.
So yeah, I mean, I'm here to partially kind of just to preach on that, because I was in that. I did the architecture program, environmental design, and I was in there for 4 years before I even heard of that other program. So, best kept secret at A&M. And I just love my job. It's been such a fun career. It's very challenging, dynamic. There's no boring days. Probably all construction's like that, but I've just had so much fun with it. And I hear my friends whining about their jobs, and I'm like, man, I don't know what to tell you. I love what I do, and it's a lot of fun. So happy to talk about it. But yeah, I've been in community development, more on the operations and construction, kind of horizontal land development side for about maybe 7 to 8 years combined now, and I've loved it. I loved every minute of it.
So we say land development for people who don't know what that means, like Kyle. What does land development mean? It's really me.
So, I mean, yeah, you could say, in my mind, land development really speaks to, you could say, in the home building space, to lot development, which is really horizontal construction. And we'll see what we talk about, right? But there's a lot of bureaucracy that you're jumping through hoops with cities, counties, utility districts in Texas. There's a lot of stakeholders that you are getting approvals from, which it could be like a year to 2 year process. And then you're really turning dirt. And we're doing heavy civil construction. So, the major things is dirt pipe paving, right? You've got your grading and excavation to get the drainage together. And then you're putting in utilities, your wet utilities, your water pipe, storm sewer and sanitary sewer. And then you pave the streets. And then you put in the franchise utilities, electric, gas, fiber, internet, phone, and sometimes security, if depending on the type of community you're building. And then and then the city, you go through the approval process. The city accepts it. They basically take ownership of the public improvements, which is the streets and the right of way and everything within that. And then by recording that plat, you subdivide the property. And then that creates all the individual lots that then you sell. Or if you're a home builder, I've worked within home building companies mainly, so it's internal transfer, right? But there's some developers who are just a developer and they sell, their retail lot developer, and they'll sell the lots to home builders. So to me, land development is that essentially horizontal construction. I've been doing more multifamily communities lately,
Mhm.
and so they call it site development because the permitting and zoning designations are different. But I'm
Yeah.
still effectively acting as not just developer and owner's rep, but the GC for everything underground and the streets, and then your screening walls and kind of just like your hardscape stuff.
Right. So this is y'all taking an empty farmland, an empty pasture, essentially taking it all the way up to
Pretty
the
much.
point where it's ready to build a house, for lack of a better term.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's taking raw land, developing it to be constructible for buildings, right? So you're putting in all this stuff that's all over our cities that nobody ever thinks about, doesn't know is there. Like, how does the water get to your house, right? Who put the street in to drive up to your driveway and things like that.
Okay, so I got two questions for you, Jack. The first one I ask all the time, which is, how did you get into land development? I mean, was it by accident? Was it by choice? Did you just kind of stumble upon it? What does that look like for you?
So I'm from small town. I'm from Huntsville, Texas. It's most famous for having death row and 7 prisons. So growing up, there was not much development. I didn't even know development was a thing. My parents were not in the industry. They're both like teachers. Nobody in my family was, and so which had never crossed my mind. And then when I went to school, I entered into the architecture program, and I spent too many nights sleeping under my desk and having chronic black eyes from fatigue. And I was like, I don't want this forever. Maybe I'm not going to pursue a master's of architecture. And but through that, I ended up having an internship in North Texas for a boutique land developer, and that was just kind of my first exposure. And I was like, oh my God, you're dealing with city, staff, urban planners, city council. You're dealing with architects, engineers, attorneys, bankers. It was just such a complex job. It seemed very dynamic and exciting, and it kind of just piqued my interest. And then, like I said, I tried my hand at a few other things, which didn't work out. And it kind of helped steer me to be like, okay, this is what I really like. And then I had a buddy who was in the program, the MLPD program at the time, and like, hey, is this really a good thing? And he was like, oh yeah, our professor, he's a land developer. It's very pragmatic, practical curriculum. It's not like frou-frou theory stuff. And the job placement is very good. And so I kind of just applied, got accepted, and I ran with it and never looked back. So
very cool. Well,
yeah.
I mean, as far as the complexity, I definitely agree. That's how I got into industrial manufacturing and why I've stuck with it. Because not only am I building a building, got to deal with the ground up stuff, but there's also the manufacturing side. There's a plant right there. They're trying to make product. We can't interrupt that. That's a big deal. And in fact, some of our work can only be done when the plant's down. So that adds more complexity too. You got to plan around that for the whole project. So long story short, I understand the complexity part of it too. Now, my second question, I'm just a dumb electrician. Okay. So I have to ask, why?
Y'all are the smartest.
Well,
Don't know.
See, now we're talking. Hey,
his head's big enough.
You can come on anytime you want, Jack.
I'm just blowing
Matt, we'll just replace you. So second question is, why on earth do they call it? Why do they call it sanitary sewer? That one blows my mind.
Well, you don't want to call it unsanitary sewer, but it does facilitate the movement of poop and pee, and gray water. So
that's what I'm saying.
Well, I guess it sounds better than the alternative, I guess, but I just call it sewer. Most of us just call it sewer, but
yeah.
And you're looking at planned sanitary sewer. Of course, there's special epoxy coatings and things. It's PVC pipe, and then the manholes have a certain coating to prevent the caustic stuff that's flowing through it from eating away at the concrete. So, and then ultimately it goes to a sewer treatment plant where it becomes sanitized. And what do they do with it from there? I don't need to know that.
Don't want to know.
Not my job.
The circle of life.
The sewer treatment plant guy does that. Yeah. Yeah, that is a funny one. That's an overkill. I mean, I guess because you got storm sewer. Technically, people don't think of it like as a sewer, but so I guess that's the differentiating term, is sanitary versus storm.
It was one of those things that when I was like branching out from electrical and I started to look at drawings and started to follow them and understand what the heck I was supposed to build the next week, I was like, wait a second, this is what? And it does what? Oh,
You wouldn't want to swim in it. That's
no.
for sure.
Well, no, Matt found it out the hard way, is from what I understand. And
I think I saw something about that.
I worked for a plumbing company, and it was you learn things the hard. Yeah, I would never be a service plumber.
hey,
I
I changed plenty of sewage pumps and people that I didn't know as an electrician. So I had fun with that.
It's
to each their own, right?
Yeah.
You hear stories from the service guys, and you're just like, yeah, you don't get paid enough. Like, I don't know how much you make, but I guarantee it's not enough.
No,
the job's never going away, though.
No, that is job
there.
security forever.
Yeah.
So there's, back on topic, there's a lot of steps in the land development stage, right? Like, what would you say is the hardest step along the way? I mean, because you got permitting, you got different engineering phases and design phases, you've got probably land acquisition, you've got all kinds of stuff. Like, what maybe is like surprisingly the hardest stage?
It's hard to say. It's all challenging in its own way, right? I mean, I don't want to say that there's a funny joke in the community, that the land acquisition guys get to have the sex and then the development guys get to carry the baby. But, so land acquisition, of course, it's not super easy. You find, sometimes realtors who maybe sell homes, they want to get into it. There's a lot of expertise that's required. Oh, y'all can still see. But a lot of expertise required to be a good broker, or to, if you're like a real old school land guy, you're looking at maps and driving around town and calling people and knocking on doors of farmers and things, right? Depending on your food group, if the more infill and urban it is, kind of the sexier real estate, you're dealing with brokers more. But it is very much a relationship oriented business, and you can't just show up and, in your first week and call any given broker or somebody and get a deal, right? There's some kind of paying your dues, it seems, and being in the industry long enough for people to know who you are, have a reputation, and a lot of it is backward looking, right? Like, is this guy, historically, when we tie up a land deal with him, is he going to close on it, or is he just tying it up to keep it off the market, right? So you build a reputation in that, and that's a whole niche within land development, right? Is the acquisition guys. I've been in the development side, but when you're around long enough, and I still get stuff sent my way, just from being somebody in the market, right? That's been here at least long enough to be known. So the development side. And I deal with acquisitions in my role as, when you're entitling land, that's acquisitions. I conduct due diligence, physical due diligence on the constructability of the site. How much topography is it? How much dirt do I have to bring in or haul off? How much, what are the unique fees of this city, right? There's so much to it. That's why I love it, because it's, you're never doing the same thing. And anytime you're doing the same task, it's different, because it's a different person you're dealing with, a different land, a different time of year. It's very dynamic. So yeah, there's an acquisition side, right? You spend, I can only speak to kind of community development, depending on if you need to create a special district, which is normal in Texas, right? That could take a year or two, depending on the size of the deal, because that's a public finance mechanism that really facilitates development in more rural areas that would otherwise not be pursued, because maybe, I've seen where we had to run 7 miles of sanitary sewer to open up this area, this peninsula, to be able to be developable, right? Well, that's a lot of money, right? And, dozens of easements from individual properties. So time, effort, and know-how, and then there's a mechanism to finance that, right? So that's it, and it's a whole other niche, right? Is the public financing in special districts. else are we doing right? Your due diligence is, you're looking at real estate metrics. What are the rents in the area? What are the home prices? What kind of home could I build here? Is the land price they're asking for? Can I pay this much for the land plus the development costs to get to a land basis on my lot to where the builder can build a home that's marketable here and make a profit? Right? So it's just, there's so many things to consider. It's really fun. And then development is construction, right? When I say development, I'm thinking of you got your plans approved for your civils, and then you break ground, you start turning dirt, and then it's probably everything that happens in vertical construction, but we're heavily impacted by weather because we're playing in the dirt. You have a 30-foot. If it rains, it's going to slow you down. So there's a lot of unknown variables, which is also kind of fun, and you're always seem to be putting out a fire, because even in your physical due diligence, right, you're doing your geotechnical testing to see what the soil composition is. You're looking at is there waters of the U.S. there? Do I have to mitigate for that? Do I have to mitigate trees, things like that? You can only investigate so much before you buy it, right? So maybe you're doing 20. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what kind of contingency do you carry? So when you get into it and you're only doing until you really get in, you probably start uncovering a ton of unknowns. Is there a percentage y'all typically carry for like a contingency for unknowns?
I've seen a range of 5 to 15% contingency. I think 10 is kind of your most typical for a land development budget, right? And then I don't even really know. I think a vertical budget might be like 2 or 3%, because they can get more. You can count sticks and bricks. You can count linear feet of pipe, but you don't know what you're running into underground, right? You might hit a water table. You might hit a different soil type than you expected from your geotechnical report, which does happen, right? And, so a little more contingency.
I've said before, like, new construction is easy, right? Because there's nothing there, right? And you're building. Once you get out of the ground, you're kind of out of surprises. But when you're doing a renovation project, like, and you're opening up walls that have been opened up in 50, 60 years, like, you don't tell what you're going to find.
Yeah, I've heard that's
your as-builts are never as-built.
We run into that too, right? It's like you got your as-built from the city, and you've planned your infrastructure accordingly, and then you dig it up, and then you find like, oh, this is 15 feet over than what they said, and what they reported to the city and their as-built was wrong, right? And so a lot of field adjustments are typical.
Can you ever go out before you acquire land, or even can you do any sort of like digging to make sure that, like, they say there's a water line here, there's actually a water line here?
That's the best practice, right? We call it potholing, which is like, say if basically they're taking that, you seem to know, right? But if, say, anytime you're developing land, you're probably connected to some development via a road or a county road or something, right? If there's ever a county road, if there's ever a right of way, there's probably something in it or under it. And whether it's a phone line or an electrical line or gas or something. And so you do your dig test, and then you identify, okay, something is wrong. Bring in a contractor to come in, and then they're basically blasting it with high pressure water and vacuuming it up at the same time to kind of gently excavate the hole until you hit the actual facility. Like, okay, here it is, and I didn't stick a bucket and cut it in half and put this community out, put them in the dark for a week, So
I'm laughing because my first experience in construction was working for my dad, and I was the potholer. I had a sharpshooter shovel behind a backhoe, and I was potholing to make sure that guy didn't hit the phone line or the power line or whatever. And we broke some stuff. I guess we lost Jack.
Looks like it.
Breaking up a little bit, guys. I don't know if.
Yeah, it's coming in and out.
You hear me now?
Yeah. Your picture's frozen.
Yeah, it just went black for me for a second, but
that's all good. So Jack, my question for you now. You hear me okay? Good. All right. So Jack, what's the hardest part of your job, would you say? Most difficult.
It's really all the soft skill stuff. I have a few guys that, work under me. I like to train and mentor. I've taken those personality tests, and it's like you're a coach, and sometimes I have the problem of uh, unwarranted advice, right? And so, which typically isn't received. But to me, it's really comes down to persistence, communication, towing that line between obnoxious and persistent, because what I tell my team is any error or something that doesn't happen in the field because of miscommunication is your fault, right? It's the only way is taking accountability for that, right? If you told some guy this on the phone and he said he was going to do it and he did this, you should have, create an exhibit, send an email, shoot a text message, phone call, document it to the point where there's no possible way they could make a mistake. Because if and you got to give them, what do you expect from your counterparts, right? Because we're dealing with 30 plus vendors on any given site. For me again, you still hear me?
It's freezing up.
Can y'all hear me?
You're back, I think.
Yeah, it's freezing up a
It
little.
looks good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me yet? Okay. So, really, I mean, it's like these soft skills that are hard to teach, that it's just like, hey man, we're setting expectations as well. It really comes down to communication. Once you have the technical knowledge of what needs to be done, that's kind of the minimum, that's the low bar that you have to get over to be competent. And from there, if you want to, how clearly and how regularly are you communicating and setting expectations? I don't want to hear, oh, they'll be out there this week. I'm like, well, it's Monday. Do you mean tomorrow, or do you mean Friday at 4? And because to him, he might think Friday at 4. And it's just all these little things that anytime you assume, okay, well, oh yeah, he meant 4 p.m. on a Friday, and oh, guess what? Oh, he didn't make it. So now it's Monday. And then a lost day turns into a week, turns into a month. So the really good project management that I've seen comes from, really just being on the phone and email a lot, making sure that, hey contractor, hey sub, this is my expectation. Is it possible, right? And not just barking out orders, but be more in a team environment of saying hey, this is what I need to happen. Can it happen? If you say no, why can't it happen? And just exploring. It's really kind of more exploratory and seeing, I have objectives and real deadlines. I got to get creative, right? How can we get there? And that's a lot of, it's something that you can't really teach, right? You can teach about the different types of construction and what that looks like and how it works, but it's all those kind of intangible skills that I've found really set people apart.
So on that topic of kind of a deadlines and persistence and all that sort of stuff, do you guys, I imagine a little bit, maybe not as much as an actual developer will be, or somebody that's actually building the building, but do you guys do a lot of interfaces with utility companies?
Utility companies like
the gas company, the electric company, those sort of stuff?
Oh yeah. Well, we are real developers, right? We might do it in house, but the difference is that, there might be an internal transfer of the site versus selling it to a third party. But yeah, absolutely. And that takes, the lead time for that seems to be the longest. If I got to deliver something in 14 months, I'm talking to that guy today, right? Hey, I need your electric design. I need your gas design. Because a lot of them, typically one informs the other. In my experience, the electric design really informs everything else, because that's the most essential. So you have to get that done. That could take months, depending on who your counterpart at the utility company is. It could be their slow guy. It could be their fast on top of it guy. And then, of course, they have their own internal requirements and documents you have to fill out. And so you get that, then you pass it to the fiber guy. Hey man, we want to dig one trench, not two, right? So
Mm-hmm.
here's this design, follow it. And of course you have to review it. It's never exactly right. You got to edit it to avoid conflicts with manholes or driveways or whatever, existing stuff. So it's just an iterative kind of process that takes, the better part of a year oftentimes.
So I
But
was
you
just gonna
start
say-
early.
Oh, definitely. And you something like that where you have 14 months, a year, 18 months, or whatever.
Mhm.
It kind of works when you're on a smaller project and you need to have. Like, I've seen it happen where you need them out there like next week or next month, and like it's just impossible.
Yeah, it doesn't
Actually,
happen.
the reason I'm actually asking is because like it's something I've been dealing with for a long time, and actually had somebody DM me this week and was like, "Hey man, you got any tips for how to get the gas company or the electric company? I mean, to show up when they're going to show up?" And I just kind of laughed, and I was like, "I got no tips, man, because that's something I
Here-
struggle with."
The secret is paying them, right? So if you got if you're putting in new facilities, you are building out the things that they need to generate new revenue. It's a new
Yeah.
customer base. I got 300 new homes for you, right? It's expensive to put in, but you're going to have a cash flow for eternity, right, from this community. You get a better service, obviously. If you're calling some guy like, "Hey, you have your existing line in my way,"
You go to the
good luck. But so that takes longer, and ideally, that's where you're finding out
you're right.
way in advance before you need that done, because it is just slow.
I think if you're one facility too, and you just need one transformer, right, or need one pole and one transformer, like you're not a priority.
Yeah, it's small change. Yeah.
So that's
And
something.
that's where the relationships come in. Like, it's like,
100%.
hey, do I know who I can talk to within that company that I've worked with for the past 5 years, that picks up the call and will do me a solid. And that's why, time in your role and in the market is really, really important for what I do.
I saw you talking about relationships. I did 2 projects back to back, and it was with the same gas company. We had to have them do something for us, right? And so the first project was a nightmare. Like I couldn't get the guy to return a phone call. He wouldn't show up when he was supposed to show up. All those types of things, right? But we got it done and we finished it out. So I go to the next project, and it's the same guy, my same contact. And so I call him, and we've already, since we completed one together, it was like old friends, and like he showed up every time he was going to show up, and he was there, and like it was day and night difference. But like since we already did one together, like it was crazy.
It really matters. Yeah. I mean, you'd be surprised, but it makes all the difference, And of course, you want a history of treating them nice, right? You don't want to be the guy who calls and every time they talk to you, you're yelling and cussing them. I think that might have been the old school way of managing, but it certainly doesn't. That's not my style, and I don't want to be yelled at work, and I don't want to yell at other people at work.
I mean, that could have been it, right? Because I wasn't. I mean, even though it was super frustrating, I never called him and yelled at him. So he probably was like, "Okay, this guy's not an
I'm
asshole."
not going to get chewed out. Yeah,
exactly.
You might just ask me for a favor.
So now it went well. So when you first got into land development, you probably had a kind of perceived notion of what it was about and all this. Was there did you have like an aha or a biggest surprise that it's something like you didn't expect it to be about or something happened?
I'll try to answer that. I don't know if I have like a perfect answer, but early on I got lucky and I really busted it and made a good impression on everyone around me that might make a referral for me. And so when I started, my first kind of serious role was at Lennar, which at the time was, one of the top few builders in North Texas. So that was a gold mine for me because there's just a super high volume of work immediately as a young project manager. And I was basically, thrown in the pool and like sink or swim. And it was a stressful time and it was a great way to learn. And I'm very happy that's how I started. And I was successful at it, because I spent the extra hours to make darn sure that I wasn't missing things that were important. And, the biggest kind of switch that flipped for me is coming in as a young guy. I was probably, mid to late 20s in that first role. And you're dealing with a lot of people who are, you are their client, right? But you're working with them as if you're on the same team. And so sometimes it maybe took a year and a half or 2 before I realized that I could call BS, right? Yes, you're all on the same team, but I'm the client, right? And sometimes there's a line that you draw where, hey, this is your problem. I'd love to help you figure it out, but you got to realize I'm not your coworker here. I'm your client,
Right.
and I need you to fix this, and I'm happy to help you brainstorm fixing it. But sometimes the lines get blurred, and you're friendly, you work with each other for years, um, and client, relationships. And so sometimes there might be an expectation that I need to do something when I'm really paying you guys $2 million to do it. And so that really helps me. And once I had enough confidence from seeing so many iterations of what I was managing to be able to call BS when someone's telling me something that's really not reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
and also being able to set that, being able to have those uncomfortable conversations when performance isn't up to par, and you got to sit someone down and be like, look, like, how do we address this? Because a lot of the guys I'm managing are, have 30 years of experience. I will never know as much as those guys, because by the time I get 30 years, he's got 50 years or whatever. So, and that's one of the fun things as a development professional. I am not a superintendent per se. I'm not, but I'm overseeing, attorneys, public finance attorneys, contract attorneys, engineers, architects, geotechnical, utility contractors, landscapers, paving contractors. There's so many different specialties. One person could not possibly know all of those, all that expertise in a lifetime. It's not possible. So you're more of a conductor,
Mm-hmm.
a coordinator, right? Of a lot of
the
people who are
experts.
really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And it's a different, it's a different kind of skill set. It's more of a people skill set, but also you got to have the technical knowledge to not get taken advantage of, obviously. And so, yeah, that was the biggest. When I'm training guys who are more green, and I'm like, the sooner you can get to realizing that you are the client and not the boss, but pretty much, right? Like, these people are working for the company you represent.
Yeah.
And once you learn enough, like, that needs to be the attitude that you take with them. Of course, always polite, friendly, and professional, because I want to enjoy my workday. But kind of that switch flipping was huge for me, because it's like, oh, like, I'm not on their team in that way. It's like, I'll do whatever I can to
Mm-hmm.
grease the wheels to get this thing rolling. But it helps with this, holding people accountable, and getting what I need, whether it takes an uncomfortable conversation or not.
So Jack, you must really enjoy working with like the public office side of things too, then, right? If you're gonna be a land developer, because I just think about, so previous engineering firm that I worked with, they did a lot of municipal work, and so got involved with a little bit of that as well. And one project that I remember was, and I was electrical, I was designing their new baseball field lighting system for them, and working with the vendor, getting all that, and eventually I had to meet with the city representatives. I think it was the city administrator that I had to meet with and present it to him, walk him through all the stuff. And he was ultimately the decision maker for that project. And so there was a lot of really close collaboration, working directly with that municipality. And so, I imagine you must do a lot of that too. Is that a part that you almost kind of would probably have to enjoy it to do what you do, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring this up, because I'd love to speak to that. There's this kind of rivalry, or kind of, I don't know how it started, right? It's like a developers and city staff and officials hating each other. Like, we're all stakeholders, right? They're representing their communities,
Mm-hmm.
and if they're good, if they really care, which they should if they've been elected or if they're appointed, right? They are trying to facilitate the best building out of their city that they can. And how can I be mad at someone for that, right? And of course, there's bureaucracy that they didn't come up with, right? They could be a bureaucrat, but it's this whole complicated system, right? And I don't like the idea that we're at odds with each other, which seems to be kind of a very common take, right? And I try to be as friendly with them all as I can, and part of that is just leveling and seeing what their role in this is, and they're kind of the gatekeeper and the quality control people, because they're answering to their constituents who pay taxes to pay for a lot of things that we build for the maintenance of roads and utilities. So I do enjoy working with them. Yeah, I mean, they're an important stakeholder, right? And uh, and that's a totally different challenging part. The biggest challenge is that every municipality is not the same, right? And not only are there different people, but even their internal standard operating procedures are different. The pathways to get to the same goal are different by varying by city.
Mhm.
And even within a city, they hire some guy from another city and he brings the idea of how things should run there. And it often happens when you're in the middle of a project, right? And so there's so much change in and navigating the bureaucracies, and that takes a whole different, well, maybe it's not different, right? It's diplomacy, being a nice, decent person to deal with, and acknowledging the role that we each play, and not calling and cursing people, and how, I'm always trying to get on the same page, right? And how can we all win, and how can we get you everything that you need, uh, from your perspective, while allowing me to do what because we deal with different constraints. I have very real financial and time deadlines. Um, so uh, I enjoy it. It's another challenging part, and it's more political,
Mhm.
diplomatic. There's like sales and presentations. I'll go up and pitch our proposals because a lot of the times, more often than not, I'm having to rezone the land, right? Whether maybe it was commercial and but it's not a good fit anymore because the development that happened around it doesn't support that. And so we need to rezone it for commercial retail to multifamily or a planned development, which is a variance of a current multifamily zoning. So there's just so many. It's just it's a different part of the complexity of what we do, and it's fun because it's just a different hat. It's not your construction hat. This is my okay, my diplomat hat. I got to go into the city, and I have to convince them that what we're building is nice and that they want it here, right? I mean, and that because most of I see what gets built is pretty nice, and probably because of the cities, right? Because
Mhm.
it doesn't get through if it's not going to be nice, So yeah, you got to be comfortable speaking in front of people and having people poke holes in what you're doing and having a ready answer for that and being able to adapt and be flexible when you have to make some changes.
So you're from the Dallas area now, right? You're from Dallas.
Yeah, I live in Dallas.
So you probably deal with like a whole bunch of little cities, I'd imagine, because it's when you get into the metroplex like that, and they probably all have their own flavor and make completely different the way they operate.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you say you're in Dallas, you're really not you're not developing in Dallas. Like it's mostly built out. There might be a few small infill parcels,
Yeah.
or I don't even call it development, right? But somebody who's tearing down a house and building a bigger, more expensive house, like that. Of course, there's a lot of brain damage that goes into that, but just the scale and complexity is quite different. But yeah, I mean, I'm working in every city but Dallas,
Yeah.
because it's those suburban growing markets where we're growing the markets, right? We're out there and trying to build houses that people can afford, that have good school districts and close to work, have fun things to do. The live, work, play kind of trifecta that you hear about, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, and that would go for any. I imagine land development in any market is going to be mostly expansive and suburban, you know, unless you're infill, right? Like now I'm doing multifamily. We'll do more infill pieces that have sat vacant for some reason or other, maybe
Right.
because they needed enough rooftops to justify taking that next step in density,
Hmm.
um, which I think is a lot of fun. And in the real estate world, the more infill and urban it is, like the sexier it is. I don't know why, but it's a little more exciting. But of course, there's more challenges with traffic control, and there's people living next door. You know, who wants to get woken up at 3 a.m. by some hammer breaking up rock or pouring pavement, right? So
Yeah.
it's different.
Those 3 a.m. concrete pours in residential areas are always fun. And we lost him again.
Losing y'all a little again, but
It's on purpose.
we
man.
good?
Everyone's just freezing, faking a freeze just to mess me up.
Yep. No. Only I get to leave.
Can y'all hear me or
Everybody
see me
else?
now?
Yeah.
Well, because of that, before Kyle leaves, because I don't know when he's ever going to bounce off, we're going to play his favorite meme game.
Yeah, right. It's time.
So I think,
Wait
Jack,
for
you've
this.
seen a couple of these. And actually, if you go back and watch the video, I have been finding a meme while we were talking because... Anyway, here we go. So for those that don't know, Kyle has to see a meme, and he has to describe it for those people that are listening to the audio podcast, not watching the YouTube video. So take it away, Kyle.
I just got to say, quick sidebar here. Two things. First of all, we need a cool intro, and then second of all, I need an even more cooler, badass little intro for this section. Just gonna throw that out there. And if anybody listening wants to help out with that, hit us up. All right. So here we go. Here's today's meme. So we've got there is a man who is wearing construction PPE with a clipboard, standing in front of some steel erection taking place in the background. Hard to say, looks to be a commercial job of some type. It could be a school or something, maybe, right? But he's standing there. He's got his clipboard. He looks awfully happy, and he's giving you the thumbs up. He's saying, "Great job." And then the headline reads, "Construction management, engineers who can't do math."
I can do math.
I have a civil engineering degree, and I'm a construction manager because I didn't want to do no more math. So,
Hey, I did engineering, and I didn't want to do math either. So don't you take that away.
man, I think I've said it on here before, but like when I did construction management specialization, I did a business minor, and I did an accounting class. And the first account, it's just plus and minus. Like after you're doing all these like differential equations and calculus 3 and all this stuff, like it's just plus and minus. And like if we get our first exam back, and I got like a 98, it's like that was stupid easy. And I'm looking around, everyone's got like 50s and 60s around me because it was like, it was accounting for non-business majors. Yeah. And so there was probably like history majors and whatever, liberal arts majors, and like the real people who can't do math. But anyway.
It's the easier of the maths, right? It might even just be arithmetic. Yeah. It's definitely not calculus.
Yeah. Oh.
So anyway, we interrupt this conversation for that. I didn't know if Jack was gonna have to get unfrozen or not. So
You just splice it in there, edit it somehow.
Kyle's gonna leave on my account. So for anybody who's like thinks that land development would be cool to get into, because we really kind of do this to kind of give back to the next generation of people kind of coming in the industry and that sort of stuff. Like, what are some tips or advice for somebody who's like, man, I want to do that. I want to go down that path. Like, how can they get involved? How can they get started? Do they have to have a master's?
You don't. And, so there's a few pathways that I've seen historically, right, that people get into this role. Either your dad was a developer and you're a developer and you start with a lot of money. That's a great way. That's not how I started, right? But
that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, that's probably the best. But, you also see civil engineers who end up being on the kind of the site development, land and development niche within civil. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about land, right? I have a buddy who he's a civil guy, but he got a master's in structural, and he's like a development manager for the tallest high rise in Brooklyn right now, right? So wow. That's real estate development, quite different, obviously. But so typically your civil guys, maybe they're serving clients like me, designing plans, helping with entitlements and navigating that bureaucracy, and then they get kind of hired by a client, or they want to take that leap and go to that side. That's a very typical path. Another is that you might have, like at a home builder, there'll be a superintendent who's really stellar, and he's, done a great job, or she or he, for quite a while, and somebody from the land department leaves and they bring in that person, right? The problem with that path is that there's quite, exponentially more superintendents in any given company than there is land people. It's 20 people vying for one job, right? Your odds are not super great, that path. Is it a path? Absolutely. Then you have some people get in. I've seen, it's not super rare to see someone who's been like a landman for oil and gas who comes into the acquisition person, because it's similar type of work, right? You're dealing with landowners, you're negotiating easements or rights over land. That's a pathway kind of to come in from the acquisition side. I've also seen maybe an attorney who might have been they might have been going to serving clients, decided to do the more fun job and go to the or you can do, architects, obviously, for multifamily and stuff. A lot of the development management people for, multifamily, which is less intensive on the underground part and more complicated on the vertical part.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was for civil guys, that would be architects on that side. This is more typical. Is got a master's degree in developer, and so that program has had a turn me, and I give back as much. Can y'all still hear me?
You're back.
You're back now. Welcome back.
All right, from the top, let's go.
I'm back. What did you last hear?
Welcome back to CM Mentors Podcast. My name is Matt Graves, and
and we just lost all the listeners.
Where did I leave you guys?
Somewhere around talking commercial and developments. Land development, I think.
Oh man, what a shit show! These are fun.
Yeah.
We lost.
What is the last thing I said
sponsor
about the pathway?
I think about attorneys.
I
heard you were talking about attorneys when I kind of lost you.
Yeah.
So some people, go from a civil engineer to development. Some people go from like a construction manager to development. Some people go from attorneys to development. I opted, because of my path at the time, I went and got a master's degree, which teaches exactly what I do in my day-to-day, and a 1.5-year program that got me in the door. And so that is a new way. That program has been around for 40 years coming up this year or next. And the enrollment's going up quite a bit. Texas is a great place to be a developer because, hundreds of thousands of people from the rest of the U.S. are moving here every year. So it's a good place for this career. And
don't get any ideas, Kyle.
Yeah. I would say the best way to get in is to go to the same master's degree program as me. It's more certain, I would say, because it kind of shows that you've committed to that career decision. It's not vague at all. Like you're getting a degree to learn. Dropped again, but so those are the typical pathways.
Okay.
So I was going to ask this a minute ago when we were talking about kind of the unforeseens you see, contingencies and that sort of stuff. What's the kind of craziest thing that y'all found, or the craziest unknown y'all found, or at least maybe if you don't have a crazy story, have you heard a crazy story of something they found when they started digging, like any Indian burial grounds or anything like that?
Oh, you would be done. Yeah,
you just shut down.
I mean, I've heard of like things, archaeologically significant stuff. If that's found, your project is done.
Right.
Ideally, you would find it before you buy it. I haven't encountered anything like that up here. I haven't even really heard about it. We don't find anything too crazy. You might find an old septic tank that they didn't know was there, and you have to abandon it. Or dig it up and haul it off.
I saw Joe Dirt. It's exciting.
I wouldn't say anything crazy.
Joe Dirt.
The bet a Joe Dirt reference wasn't on your bingo card for this.
Good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing too crazy.
Well, that's
Knock
kind
on wood.
of boring.
Boring is good in this case. Yeah, for me.
Yeah.
We were doing a project in downtown Austin, and we were digging, and we found, I guess, downtown Austin has lived, many lives, different. It was a music venue, was their music hall, and we knocked that down. And before that was some sort of general store with like a grain mill in the back. So I think what they did, we ended up finding basically big metal like silos, I guess. I think when they built the music thing, they just like knocked those down, covered them up with dirt, and just built their on top of it. So we started digging, and we're like, what is this? And it just kept going and kept going and kept going, and it was like 12-foot diameter, and we had to get it out. Anyway, it was kind of like one of those things.
If we find stuff, we typically remove it. We don't just cover it up, sweep it under the rug. So
well,
it's just an unforeseen expense, but it's never too crazy. You might spend 10 or 15 grand to haul it off.
You know how they do this stuff back in the 50s and 60s. They just buried it and kept going.
Yeah.
And so we had to dig it out and remove it. It was one of those things. But and I was kind of mad because it was crazy. It was a tangent here, but like we were digging with the excavator, and it picked it up, and there was a pile of dirt on it, and like an old glass bottle, like really cool old glass bottle that was probably from like 100 years old. And I was like, sweet. I went and grabbed it, and I set it behind the silt fence and kind of hid it because I had to get to a meeting. And so I came back later that afternoon, and it was shattered into like 100 pieces. And I was just like, what? How? And,
Lesson learned.
I should have took it with me. It was an old whiskey bottle or something. But it was, anyway, really cool.
Yeah. Yours is more interesting than mine.
It wasn't that interesting. You're doing a lot of digging. I figured.
Glass bottle, yeah.
That's cool. So, I mean, we're kind of getting close to an hour here. Is there anything else land development wise, or anything you should like the kind of next generation kind of come up into this industry should know? It seems like there's a lot of parallels between sort of that sector and like general construction too, and kind of like, me and Kyle are owners reps. And a lot of the stuff you're saying, I think me and Kyle been like head bobbing along with you, like, yep. The same, you're building a different product of sorts, right? But it's like the process is almost damn near the same, it feels like.
Right. Yeah, I guess, and I really admire what you guys are doing with this podcast.
I don't know how to respond to that.
I didn't. Must have said Siri or something.
Rude.
I said Siri off. Everyone's chiming in this episode.
It's one way to get a live audience.
Now. I've just, obviously there's a huge kind of deficit in people entering the construction industry, right, in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why that is. It's like, it seems like a joke to me. I don't know why the idea of sitting behind a computer typing in code is sexier building a building that someone's going to occupy, right? I don't know what's more appealing about that, right? I think
it's
a lot of it comes
dirty.
down to that. The perception of money, right? Like, is it, people think, okay, I'm in tech. Well, everything has a website. Everything is tech, right? But in construction, what I found, when I was in high school, I worked for $10 an hour, 60 to 80 hours a week all summer doing flooring, right? And maybe I don't want to do that forever. That was my kind of foray into construction.
Right.
And as I grew, it's an industry where you're confronted with very dynamic work, where you're constantly facing something new. There's problem solving multiple times every day, right? It's just very interesting, right? And the longer you do it, the better you get at it and the more you know. So for anyone who likes to grow and get good at something, which is really more, people speak about passion. I found that when you get good at something, you'll be passionate about it, right? It's that feeling of expertise that you can be proud of. And this kind of career has given that to me, right? So I like being challenged, and I also like dealing with people. I don't want to just stare at a computer. So I love getting to talk to dozens of people every day. You get to know each other. You're dealing with hundreds of people, laborers and clients and consultants and contractors coming together to build something where people are going to live, have a family. I think it's incredible. It's obviously important. We're all in a building right now. We're about to go out and drive on a street to the other building that we go into.
Right.
So, I would love to encourage more people and say, like, you can think you're really smart and still go into construction, right? You don't have to go into tech, or you don't have to go into, and I don't want to like crap on sales, right? That's a different pathway, but you can, I don't know what the misconception of construction is. It's incredibly challenging and rewarding to me, and it draws on different skills. Maybe, as a manager, it's a lot, you're needing some insight into how people work, psychology, and, communication. And, but I love that aspect of it, the interpersonal aspect. And so I just want to encourage more young people considering, like, where do you want to work and make a living, just to explore, land development and construction as a whole, because it is very rewarding. And it's not, I don't know what people think it is, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to always be dirty, and everyone's not crotchety and grumpy, and it's not just a bunch of, 70-year-old salty guys, right? It's a dynamic industry that is diverse and engaging. And so I think that's a message that I can get behind.
Cool.
I agree. And if you are interested in the technology, there's a lot of cool technology that's coming into the construction industry too. So you can definitely find that here.
And if you work in construction, you can probably come up with a tech solution, right? But if you're starting in tech, it's hard to solve a problem about an industry you know nothing about, right? So there's opportunities in that way too, but you have to know enough about the problem to solve it.
I could get on a soapbox about people coming in, trying to think they're going to, from the outside, trying to build some sort of technology solution that no one's ever going to buy. And so I've seen a few of those. But anyway,
it happens.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Jack.
Yeah.
No, thanks for having me. Yeah.
I learned a thing or two today.
Hopefully, Spread the word about construction. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Great talking to you.
Yep. See you later.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
Bye.